Hi, my name is Dominic Spurling. I'm a Director of IT at Rubric, and today I would like to talk about localization pipelines and how to make them fast, reliable, and accurate. So let's dive straight into the first slide. So first of all, what is a localization pipeline? I'm simply talking about the whole process that will take your product in its source language, US English, for example, and it will extract the translatable content from the product itself and the documentation associated, and it will put that content through a localization process involving translation memories and human translators, and then it will reintegrate the content back into the product. So you'll end up with multiple versions of your product for different markets. So at Rubric, we will typically manage either all of this pipeline or sometimes just this part in the middle. So sometimes we do the full end-to-end. We manage the extraction from the source system where the content is authored and the reintegration back into the content management system or other repository of content. Or sometimes the client will do this part and the reintegration part, and we will manage the middle section, the main translation workflow. So we really can do as much or as little of the process as you require. Typically, localization pipelines can be slow. They often involve a lot of manual steps, and that also opens them up to potential errors, human errors, and it makes them harder to repeat. So our objective is always to make our pipeline as fast and accurate and reliable as it can be. The most important piece in our strategy is automation. So wherever we can, we will automate. And that will often involve integrating with the source platform where the content is authored, so that we have as few manual steps in the extraction and reintegration side as possible. We want to extract the content in a very clean way so that the translator is presented with just linguistic text, no extraneous code. So we want to hide that complexity from them to avoid the possibility of them introducing errors in that code. And we try to provide the translators with context wherever possible. So we want to extract contextual information at the beginning to put alongside the linguistic text so the translator knows what they're looking at. We employ a number of automated QA tools, analysis tools that are designed to catch potential bugs in the pipeline and the automation, and to catch them as early as possible so that we can maximize the quality. And finally, I'll talk about an example workflow where we have a just-in-time translation process for a team who need their product to be ready to ship at all times. One of the key pieces in our automation tools is something we call Rubric Ant, and this is a general purpose content transformation, text data transformation tool. It's analogous to Apache Ant, if you've ever worked with that in software development, and it transforms a set of content based on a configuration, and it will produce a normalized or an adjusted content set as a result. So this is used to make the content more consumable by downstream platforms, and it's often used to introduce custom formatting or special encoding rules before the content gets reintegrated into the destination platform. So Rubric Connect refers to the custom modules we build to integrate directly with client content platforms. So there's very rarely a one-size-fits-all connector that will do a great job of extracting content from your CMS and then reintegrating the translated content back in at the end of the process. So we will often do some custom development to make that process work for your particular environment. And it streamlines the beginning and end parts of the workflow, the handoff and delivery steps. So this will typically work with content management systems, product information systems, or Git repositories, or just about any repository where content is authored and maintained. Hiding complexity from the translator. So I've illustrated this with a couple of examples. When a piece of content or a resource file is parsed, it will often contain codes such as this one, which represent variables. and we don't generally want to allow the translators to see those variables or edit them or modify them in any way. So in the top case, the parser has not protected this variable, it's just left it in its raw form. In the bottom example, it has become this little 2, and that's a placeholder which the translator can't edit. They can find out what the variable name was behind that if they want to give them the context, but the variable will always be carried across to the translation intact. So another thing we do for translators to help them improve the accuracy of their translations is we try and give them as much context as possible. Now, in resource files or in source content, there might be contextual information that's been added by the author to help translators, and there isn't a standard way of adding that kind of annotation, so we use Rubric Ant to extract it in the whichever way is necessary for that particular format, and we make sure that it makes its way into the translation management system and is presented to the translator. So when they're translating this segment, they can click on a little note and get the contextual information that's been taken from the original source file. Finally, at the end of the translation process, we use a tool we call Rubric Catcher, and this is designed to proactively analyze files and detect potential anomalies or problems, things that were unexpected, and then that report will be examined by a project manager and by translators, if appropriate, to decide whether or not the problem that's been flagged is actually a problem. So in this case, between revision 1 and revision 2 of a piece of content, it has detected that the English did not change, but the French did change between those 2 revisions, and that's not normally expected. If the source doesn't change, we don't expect the target to change. In this case, it's actually not a linguistic change that's occurred, it's an encoding change. Now, this may be expected if the encoding requirements have changed, but if not, then we would certainly follow up and investigate why this had happened and potentially update our configuration files if there is actually a bug in the pipeline. So finally, I'll talk about our example of a just-in-time translation workflow. So this picture is a bit more complicated. What we have here is time going from top to bottom and various platforms and processes across from left to right here. So the client's repository here is starts at point A, and we are going to pull the whole of that content for translation. It will go into our translation management platform, and it'll go through a traditional human translation process, which may take days or potentially weeks, depending on the volume and the complexity. And during that time, the client has continued to work on their content. So by the time we get to point B, the translations are ready, but the source content has actually changed, and we will pick up on that, and we'll do a comparison between point A and point B. We'll take the differences and very quickly machine translates those differences and deliver a final result, which is an up-to-date set of translations where the vast majority of the content has been human translated, and it's only the delta between A and B that's been machine translated. So it allows the customer to continue working. They don't need to have a content freeze, and by the time we have delivered, they are still ready to ship, even though they've been changing their content in the interim. Lastly, I will just go through some frequently asked questions that we get asked. So in the technology team at Rubric, we are very close to the PMs. We sit in the same room as some of the PMs, and on a day-to-day basis, there's a fair bit of a conversation back and forth. Project managers are quite technically knowledgeable in their own right, and they can do quite a lot of the engineering themselves, and they can configure our tools, but very often they'll need help with that, and we have a tech ops team who are on hand to help with that. Second question is, how much automation versus human power do you use? So in the last slide I gave an example where there was a small percentage of machine translation being used for the actual translation process itself. Now that could be 100%, or 0%. So it varies according to the requirements of the customer, and that depends on a lot of things. But automation is not only machine translation. A lot of the automation we do has to do with this pipeline. So it's the disassembling of your original product, putting that content in front of the translator cleanly, and then reintegrating everything at the end. And really, this is where the bulk of our automation effort goes. So last question, does the client own their own translation memory? And can I elaborate on Rubric's TM policy? The client absolutely owns the translation memory, but what we do find is that over the course of many revisions of a product, the translation memory can get quite hard to manage, and we have some strategies which we employ in our own translation management system for managing TMs and historical translation memories, and making sure that you're always getting the most up-to-date and most relevant translation, whilst also retaining memories for long-term leveraging, so that if phrases come back after a period of time, we still have the memory for those. So Rubric is normally heavily involved in translation memory management, but of course the translation memory itself belongs to the client, and we would provide exports whenever needed. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention today, and I hope this has given you some insight into Rubric's approach to localization pipelines. If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website at rubric.com.